purpose of the Know the Ledge project is to enlighten the masses about the undocumented heritage of Britain. We want to discuss immigration. In 2015, this has become a hot topic because of the powerful showing of UKIP in the last general election, the refugee crisis in Europe with the African and Syrian refugees. Our team of young volunteers and young historians had a primary objective to discover how migration has affected Britain, and what we found has been a wealth of information. In this documentary, first we will show you the interviews with a variety of people from Britain and find out their thoughts on immigration. We asked one of the founders of the English Defence League as to why they started their organisation. Dr. Martin Glynn will look at the role of colonialism in migration. Then we will look at the history of migration into Britain. We will look at how immigration is affecting German society and the work that youth workers in Germany are being challenged with. We asked 119 people across Birmingham and the UK the same 10 questions about how they felt about Britain and migration in 2015. We wanted the raw truth about how people feel about these issues in 2015, and these are the unedited answers that we received.
Well, my mother's from a place called Mancott in North Wales, and my father's from a place called Cessnock in Kendal, near Negril in Jamaica. On my mother's side, we had a genealogist trace my mother's family back as far as Charles I. And when I was in Jamaica, I actually traced my father's family back to Nigeria. So in some respects, I'm not English in that sense.
Okay, my mum and dad were originally born in India, Jalandhar, and of course I understand that India became split and it turned into Pakistan and India. My mum ended up migrating to Pakistan and my dad went to Kenya, and they eventually ended up marrying and coming to Britain, and yeah, that's what I know. So in terms of my ethnicity, I usually feel a bit complicated on how I answer it, but I would say Indian.
Alright, now I get asked this question. When I get asked this question, sometimes it's like I don't know. It's these kind of questions are confusing because of the journey that my family's had. Now I could say my family are Caribbean. My family come from the Caribbean, but in reality, my family going far back, there was like the Caribbean was where they brought slaves, and that was for rebellious slaves. We sort of heard or sort of been told the Caribbean is where the rebellious slaves were. So that's not where we come from. That's not where I come from either. So I have to go back again. Where Africa? What parts of Africa? Like that's something that's I wouldn't know, because that information was taken away from me. What I do know, which is why I think I can even go back further, is because of the kind of information I like to take in. And I'm having a conversation with my mom. She told me that my great-great-grandmother was Syrian. So now I kind of know that's where my people come from. Even if they travelled through, came to the Africas, settled in Africas, and then slavery happened, and then they left in the Caribbean, and then we came here. So when you would say where my family's from, I would say Syria, because that's as far back as I can go. So as far as I'm concerned, that was my family's indigenous land. And some people would probably be confused because even my skin complexion, if you see a Syrian today or someone of Syrian ethnicity today, they'd be very light skinned and this and that. But we have to realise, going back, those lands there were dark skinned people. So I would say Syrian, because that's just as far back as I can travel, if that makes any sense.
I describe myself as British, but also Pakistani, because obviously I'm a Pakistani. You can see that I'm a Pakistani as well. But I would say that I'm British. I would never say that I'm not, because I'm born here, raised here. My principles, morals, they've developed from here. So I'm just as much British as I am Pakistani.
Well, I suppose in the tick box I would be white British, and my father is from Scotland and my mum was from Liverpool. So, and I think they came over from Ireland. So I think they, way back in the 18th century. But I have to say that I know a lot more about the history of the lunar men than I do about the history of my own family. So, but unfortunately, because my parents have both died, I haven't really researched the family history. So.
Well, firstly, I was born in London, in Camden, and when I grew up in Camden, I guess the biggest thing was being from Camden. If anyone said where you're from, you say, I'm Camden. Because you just mix around certain places and that's where you're from. My father was from Bangladesh, and actually he was in this country accidental. He at quite a young age, at 10, his father, as I understand it, died, and his stepfather, his next father, was not very nice to him, so at 10 he left home. He came from a little village in just outside Chittagong, went through Burma, lied about his age, become a seaman, then got British citizenship based on being an Indian seaman, because Bangladesh wasn't a country then. So fought in the war as a seaman. At the end of the war, then naturally was a seaman on British companies. Had an accident which put him in hospital for a long time, got compensation, then he settled in England. He met my mother. Mother was from Wales, she's Welsh, from a mining village. Her father kicked her out when she was 16 after she'd become pregnant, unmarried, very traditional family. So at 16 she was on the streets of London, met my dad, who was a very charming, handsome man. And that's the roots of where we are. And I grew up in quite a large family, so I'm one of 10. I'm the youngest boy, and yeah, as the youngest boy, my dad made a great effort to make me understand that I was Muslim. He didn't make that with all the rest of the family in the same way. So I understood that. I was one of the few of his children. I have a sister who settled in Bangladesh, who was interested enough to go to Bangladesh, so that part of who I am was always there. At one point I was going to settle in Bangladesh with him. Fortunately he became ill, and that led to him dying in this country. But yeah, so that's my background, if you like, in that.
Honestly, I came from Sudan. My background from Sudan. I'm African, particularly African from Sudan. Or my parents, my brothers, sisters, they live in Sudan.
My parentage and my heritage is from Ireland. My mother and father are both Irish, and Dublin. They came here 50 odd years ago now, and but my father, although I love my Irish heritage, very proud of my Irish heritage, all my Irish relatives in Ireland, I love to crack with the Irish, and I love Ireland, it's neither here nor there, but my TikTok for me is England, right? So although I love Ireland, I've no allegiance to it as such.
Yeah.
My heart. I know that if I'm watching England, to say the football to use as an analogy, if I'm watching the football, when I watch England, the passion comes up from my toes. I just want to support my country. So it's one of those. But I'm very proud of my heritage. But my father, very wise man. There were 6 of us, 6 kids. So what he did, as we were growing up, he took us at one side and he said, listen, this is mine and your mother's flag, right, the Irish tricolour, right? So, but this is your flag, the George Cross, the Union / Union Jack. And that's what he did. And as a kid, you wouldn't understand that. So he said, Always be proud of your parents and your heritage, but you were born here and this is your country, so your loyalties are to this country. So he's done that with all of us, and we've all grown up loving England. You know, we're very proud, very patriotic, but we've all got a profound love and respect for our Irish roots. So I think that's a fantastic way of doing it, and I wish that people could do that and would do that today, because we would have half the problems that are going on in society if first, second generation teenagers were taught that from other backgrounds, you know, other heritages, other than England. So that's my background. So I was brought up in a council estate in Luton, and I loved it. You know, Luton, I love Luton town. You know, I love the people in it. I love the place. A lot of happy memories. So, but growing up in Luton, it's a unique place. You know, it really is unique because the diversity in Luton, everybody just gets on like a house on fire, particularly the black and the white. And that's how we were raised. And there's nowhere else like it. Everywhere else I've been all over the country, nowhere else was like Luton, where the black lads and the white lads were like that. You know, they just run together, and that's how I met all my friends like Nigel, and we grew up together, and that's it. And I don't know if that formula could be used somewhere else. What a great thing.
My family are from Pakistan, Punjab. One side, but both very country. Kasur is a village on the border of India, and my father's side is from Medina, which is a settlement village supposedly founded by Arabs. So Pakistani, Punjabi.
My mother's of Persian descent, so she would originate from Iran, South Iran. Although ethnically her ancestors were from Central Asia, which is just below Russia. And my father is from the Punjab, and it's part of Pakistan now, originally part of India. That's my background.
My nationality is British. I was born in Britain, but my family originates from Jamaica. Well, I think historically most people that refer to themselves as British, their family or their ancestors come from countries like Norway or Germany or France, and they just travelled here, and I think if they have the right to be here without any problems, that other people that come from countries of poverty and war should be allowed to be here.
East side of Slovakia, which is really near to Russia, so we got kind of roots from Russia, from Slovakia and Hungary as well. So all traditionals come from three countries at the same time. So it's really, really good.
I would define myself as British, but the sociology of Britishness means that Britishness is tended to be defined by middle-class values, and anybody that deviates from that is not referred to as British. So when I say I'm British, I'm expanding the definition and moving the benchmark, mainly because the historical context of me being here guarantees me that right. So therefore the tension comes is according to those who claim Britishness as a singular focus, middle class, white and British. So yes, I'm definitely British.
I like the idea of me retaining my ethnic ties, you know. I like the idea of being Persian, Punjabi, because I speak those languages too, and also having a British identity. I have no issues and no problems negotiating those different relationships or multiple identities.
When I go to other countries, there is only one way to describe myself, and that is I am British. You know, I can't identify with being Pakistani, I can't identify with being African or Indian. I'm British.
Describing myself, I'm African British, yes.
I'm only British as far as my geographical location is concerned. I'm South Asian. On a greater historical, from a greater historical perspective, I'm Asiatic, feeling that the original nations were all connected by one landmass, and there were links, cultural and historical, that unified those people. Each of those people have the unique experiences on a global level, but I subscribe to Asiatic.
Well, I'm a lot of things, and I think if you are secure, you're happy to describe yourself in those ways. I'm a West Bromwich Albion fan. I'm a father, for example. I'm a married, man. I hope I'm a good father, and those things are more important to me than all those other things. I'm a Muslim, yeah, that's important to me. I'm a Londoner, even though I love Birmingham and I would never go and live back in London. But I'm not a Brummie in that sense of the word. And being from Camden is important for me. I'm part of my family. So all of those are much more personally more important than saying, am I this or am I something else? But I guess that's partly because I'm very secure in who I am, and I've gone through quite hard times in my life growing up. I didn't grow up in a wealthy or secure economic family in that sense. I grew up with violence around me, so having gone through those and come out of those and been supported to do well in education and so on, I'm secure in myself. So it doesn't matter. I'm British when I go abroad because my passport says I'm British. Yeah? I'm a Muslim when people ask me around who I am. My politics, I see myself, when I look at the far right, for example, I'm black. I'm not even Asian, but I never grew up like that. I grew up like, well, we're just black because they see us like that. And sometimes you take on the labels that other people put on to you in that sense. But I'm equally as happy to say I'm English, and in some ways that's my mother tongue. I was growing up in England. I support the English football. I don't support cricket, so I don't have that. Bangladesh ain't that they're never in the World Cup anyway, so I never really that split, So, I am, I'm a football fan, and, so, when it comes to football, I'm English, and I want English, I always wanted to do well. I have the same dreams and aspirations as most English people do when England are in the World Cup, and I get equally disappointed, but, I'm a Baggies fan, so I'm used to that as well. So,
I'm describing myself as a Slovakian because I come from Slovakia. I'm born in Slovakia, and I will be British once I will get my British passport, my British resident in UK, and I will speak fluently English as normal English people would actually be living normal English life as they do. But I doesn't like that kind of life. I like my kind of life, the way I used to live with my parents in Slovakia. That nobody can take that off me.
Well, British means an all-encompassing, very diverse label, and it means different things to different people. But the problem is if you tie what it means to you in relationship to power, political systems and economics, that's what tends to define Britishness. So from that point of view, it's very diverse, it's very complex, it's not singular, and it's something that is always embryonic, it's always growing, and it's always changing. So there's never going to be a fixed definition of Britishness.
The word British, as far as it's concerned, like the word itself, I'd say it means somebody from Britain who has a nationality, a formal nationality. So apart from that, I'd say it's a place where then the other characteristics would come into it are British people or decent people, a place where you can find work, it's good to start a business or become successful. It is a small land of opportunity, really. So British can mean that too.
British. British means to me to live in Britain, have a British passport and become British. That's all it means to me, just a piece of paper.
The word British to me means someone that has willfully become a part of the colonizing empirical entity that went around the world stealing, raping, pillaging. So even if a person doesn't know this themselves consciously, that title assumes an association with that charter.
That's a really difficult question. I don't know if I've ever really sort of properly considered it. It's not like, I suppose it's a coming together of, you know, England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, but it's also, you know, anybody who comes here from other country, I don't sort of think to myself, well, they're not British. I just think of Britain as sort of a melting pot of lots of different cultures.
But this is. I think people have to understand that British is a political term. It's not neutral. Yeah. So on a personal level, it simply means, you know, that's my passport. I'm British when I go to another country. That's what that means. You know, politically, it means a lot of different things. When I was growing up, British meant, you know, the British, you know, National Party, the National Front, and white. I mean, and that's because that's what I grew up. You know, my family were petrol bombed by racists 3 times. You know, first time I was 5. Now I didn't really know much about that till I was 10. You know, but when I was 10 and we had, you know, fire put through our doors, I realised, you know, that British, if you like, or the British flag was a nationalist, racist flag. As I grew up politically, I've come to understand that British at one level means, you know, colonialism. It means, you know, all of that goes with that. It means a system and a class. As I've grown older, I've also realised that it actually is a people and a country that is actually, you know, despite what you hear in the press, most people are actually good neighbours, they're good people, you know, very welcoming, the majority of it. I mean, it's a great place to be, but it's not a neutral term. So, you know, for me, it depends on what context I'm in, how I would view British and what it means in that sense.
This little island we live on, we're tolerant, decent people, you know, we're all by and by educated. British has a sense of values, a great sense of right or wrong. I think being British is carbon copied as a formula, as a winning formula all around the world. I mean, I think other countries, other continents look at the way we do things in Britain and they think that's the way forward, you know, and they may doctor it and spin it and turn it and change it, but a lot of countries use the way we do things, our etiquettes, our values, our legal system, because we've got such a well-established history. And I think part of being British is just being that. It's just being a decent, upstanding human being. We're very tolerant, which is great. But you have to know the line between where does tolerance become takeover. You know, you have to say to yourself, look, being British is great, but there's only so many people you can fit on the island, if you know what I mean. If you want to talk about the immigration thing, it's great to be British, but there's a lot of people here that are not proud to be British. And then you have to question, well, what's your reasons for being here? Well, you're not proud to be British, you don't like the Union Jack. You don't like the country, you don't like the people, you don't like the legal system, you don't like the law, you don't like the government. You burn the flag, or you spout bile and hatred towards British people, to the British legal system, the British Parliament, or whatever. And you'd have to question their motives of what they're doing here. So being British is part of it is loving being part of Britain.
Well, it means, to me, it just means someone who is a British citizen now. It's as simple as that. That's what it means to me now. But throughout my life, it's meant different things. So, for instance, when I was younger, I was made to feel that I wasn't British because of the colour of my skin, and that someone who was truly British had to be white. But I think with time and the passage of time, I've realised that really anyone can be British. It's just a matter of citizenship. But unfortunately, I don't always feel that people of different ethnic background are sometimes allowed to feel British.
Absolutely. People from other countries have an absolute stake here, primarily because we're here, only because they were over there. So from the resources that were stolen from original nations around the world, to then how cheap labour was exploited to build the industry in this country, to then how it's still maintained by migrants. How many seconds would it take for, say, the NHS to collapse if migrants weren't here? Therefore, we have an absolute right to not just be here and live here, but to thrive and become something here.
Yeah, absolutely. Reason being, nearly everybody who's come to this country from another country, well, I'd say about 90% of people that I know, 95% come here because they don't, or they're not happy with their country, or the current state in their country is beyond livable. So that's why they're here. I think every human has a right to be in a place where it's safe and sound and also respectable to live.
We have right to be here, like them, they have right to be there. I say we should be there here as well. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you, I'll show you what I'm leaving, what I'm doing. Like what people they said, we come here, we getting benefit. But me, I don't get no benefit from this country. That's how I live. That's what, though I live here. See, there's my milk, heating, my fridge there, my TV there. The one I'm trying to survive in this country is out, no helping. So don't think we coming to use the country. Yeah, we come here to survive only, to live in peace.
Of course they do. Look, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents are immigrants to this country, yeah? Immigrants from Ireland. But they came here, they took nothing for nothing, they worked extremely hard. They've worked hard all their life, they've raised 6 kids, they taught us right from wrong, you know. As kids we had very little because obviously working class, immigrants trying to work their way up the ladder. My dad was working hard, my mum worked hard all her life. And they've done a great job of us, you know. We've got 6, you know, what I like to be, people might disagree with me, 6 well-balanced individuals, you know. So, you know, of course they have a right to be here, but you have to, in the same breath, you have to have a common sense approach to immigration, right? We're a tiny island, you know, we've only got so much land space. So what do? You can't just open the floodgates and let every blade of grass be taken up and build on every green belt and build every house until there's no more room for anyone to breathe, you know. You have to have limits and you have to have rules and regulations on immigration. And you have to have sensible immigration, you know. Not saying, I mean, if I had my way, I would just say, look, and I think everyone would agree with this. At the minute, our house, our country, yeah, just call it our house, for euphemism, is in a mess, is in a terrible mess, right? There's so many problems going on, especially with immigration. So why don't we just use common sense and say, right, boom, 5 years we're going to stop it, except for crucial immigration. If someone's a neurologist or, you know, a heart surgeon and they want to come in, somebody like that, you know, you can't really say no, you know, someone's want to make people better, you know. Heal people, stuff like that, but just to allow everybody in without no health screen checks, without no legal checks, criminal record checks, you can't do that. Look at the mess we are in now. It's shocking, and I think everybody would agree with that. I mean, you'd be incredibly naive not to agree with that, because that's the reality. It's there every day, staring at us. So let's just put a cessation on that. Get our house in order, you know, get it all tickety-boo, get it squared up, and then have another look at immigration. That's just common sense, surely. Surely, God, that's just common sense.
I think people that come from other countries and, you know, come to Britain, whether or not they have the right to be here, my answer to that has really evolved over time. I think in the beginning, I was like, yeah, totally, you know, and then there was a bit of me, I guess, that was a little bit selfish, becoming British and really just not relating to my own heritage, that thought, God, you know, these people, you know, if they're going to come to Britain, then have the right etiquette when you come. So there was a part of me that actually said, well, no. But then as I got older, I related to the fact that, well, actually, had that attitude have prevailed, my own parents wouldn't have been here. So overall, yeah, I think they do have the right to come to Britain under certain conditions and circumstances.
Well, I mean, it goes back to this notion of like, yeah, I mean, we're all immigrants. A right is a very odd term. So legally depends on the law, yeah, in that sense. Do I have a right to be here? You know, I mean, in some countries, if you are from immigrant families, you're not a citizen of that country. I was born here. You know, this is my country more than any other country. I mean, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else other than, you know, sometimes I think Australia would be nice because it's hot and so on. But you know, you go to countries on holiday and you think, you know. But I actually quite I love my life in this country. I love the people I work with and move with. I fell in love with a beautiful. I mean, I'm from Camden, but I live in Birmingham because I fell in love with a Brummie woman. Had children with a good old Birmingham lass, and I love her, and this is my life. So in that sense, the law is one thing. If you define rights by legalistic, it depends on who's in government at the time. If you actually define it on, do you know what, you know, I feel like wherever I am, I should be able to go. I choose not to, but I should have the right to do that anyway. And you know, there's nothing. There's, you know, people move for it. You know, most people like where they live and grow up. You know, I mean, there's a fallacy that everyone in the world wants to come to England and Britain. It's a fallacy. You know, we create these stories, or the press does at least. It's not true. Most people are content and get on with their lives and happy with their lives where they are. And particularly if you look around, you know, contentness and happiness, surprising, particularly when I used to go to Bangladesh, is like how contented and happy people are with things that we would think, oh, they don't have a lot. You know, you live and wash under a tube well, and my family lived in a village where, you know, they didn't have constant running, you know, hot water and whatever. But actually, all my nephews, nieces and whoever was distantly related to me were content and happy and lived their lives and were quite satisfied. And most people are like that. Of course, at times of war or famine, of course people get displaced and whatever. So I would say, yeah, people on a moral and a humanistic and dare I say even in God's law, you know, yeah, people have a right to be where they are happy and contented, really. I guess people have the right to be happy and secure. Most people move to either be more economically secure or to be secure from war, terror, you know, famine and so on. And so yeah, people have that right. And we're all immigrants. I guess at the end of the day, if you look into your roots, we're all immigrants.
I'm going to say we're all humankind. We're all from this planet Earth. So, not saying there shouldn't be structures to where how people can move across borders or how people can settle and whatnot. Not saying there shouldn't be that, but I'm saying how can I say they don't deserve to be here? I definitely can't say that because when my grandparents were here, they were the immigrants. So if they ain't got a right to be here, neither have I. But saying that, I believe no, even though I was born here, even my grandparents and they weren't born here, but they definitely got a right to be here, because without our people, without us people from my descendant, like, this country wouldn't be what it is now. That's the reality.
Yes. Yes, I believe because people got rights to be in any kind of country, not just in European Union, around the world, because the world belongs to people. And that when the people say you can't come to that country, why? There's a question why. People can't answer this question why. Because people are coming for better lives to other countries, because their country can't get a life that actually people are looking for. That's why we're moving to other countries for better life. And but it's better life, people doesn't want those people to come from bad countries, because what they think, they will get the benefits, they will use the situation in a good country, and they think that bad people from bad countries, they will put the good country into that position as their country is at the moment. That's all.
Well, you know, I'm not in any position to disagree why people have come here in the first place or otherwise, but from my research, I have found that specific communities have come here for a number of reasons, but they have a very special connection to this country. And those particularly from the colonies, old British colonies. They have done a lot for this country, especially during World War I and II, and even before, to be honest. So the kind of people that I'm talking about are people from the Caribbean islands, Africa, people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. We have large communities from this part of the world living in the UK, and they have very strong connections for a number of reasons. And I just don't believe anyone is in a position to question their loyalty or contribution to Britain.
Sometimes as an academic, I feel that I'm in a privileged position, but in terms of my academic knowledge, my intellectual capacity, I feel that sometimes it's subordinated based on the way we look at how knowledge is produced. Because of racism and the racialization of the social structure, I feel marginalized at times. So there's a lot of times in terms of the psychology of Britishness, I don't feel I have a sense of belonging. Therefore, the importance for me is to create my own sense of belonging and inclusion within British society.
I'd say I feel a part of British society more than I feel a part of my own society, my own country, because there I feel more outcasted than I do here, which is something to think about.
Whether or not I feel part of British society has really changed, I think, and it's become a really emotive discussion, I think. You know, I've only been practicing Islam for 6 years, and the moment I started practicing Islam, you know, was the first time I got called a Paki, you know, that was the first thing. And then, you know, secondly, I think I felt, you know, what was happening with the media and this whole concept of Islamophobia. And I feel like it's really railroaded me and given me this, this idea that in order for me to be in Britain and to be a Muslim now, I have to look a certain way and behave a certain way. And that I don't like, you know, I don't think anyone should feel that way.
Same thing. But of course this country has a duty of care, but it's unfortunately, the only way we can express that is through politics and the ballot box. And you know as well as I do that if our children are miseducated and grow up as adults who are miseducated and grow up as in midlife and miseducated, the awareness to be able to can challenge and contest and make it accountable is not there. So the conspiracy rolls on. But the middle classes would never. If you look at the Second World War, what are we doing at the moment? And the First World War, we're celebrating 100 years since the First World War. This country's not going to forget the contribution we made to the war. So there's so when history intersects with the aspirations of a nation, then the duty of care comes into being. But when this country perpetuates acts like it did through slavery, it suddenly becomes, well, that was a long time ago. Well, if you look at the ending of slavery to the beginning of the First World War and the Crimean War, it wasn't really a massive amount of distance.
By law, I am British, but I think my culture is different. I don't follow the typical British culture. Well, really the word British means someone that was born in Britain, but it changes because you can come to Britain and refer to yourself as British, or you can follow the British culture and still call yourself British, so it really differs to how you think the word means to yourself.
Change. I don't think there's much that can be changed, because based on like things such as racism, racism, when people say, oh, racism still exists, of course it's going to exist. It's to do with an individual person, and when individual people come together with similarities, it forms a group, and then that's where stuff like EDL comes from, where people don't like people of colour in the country, in Britain. So I feel that racism is always going to happen no matter where you go.
It couldn't call it the United People Luton anymore, so it had to go national. So then you had the English Defence League, which for me was, we had to put some ethos behind it, a bit of thought in it. It was like equality, democracy and liberty, everything that these people stood against. So hence English Defence League. So it just, and then it just grew from there. But then it just, well, it's phenomenal what happened after that. But it took a lot of, it took 110% of effort, you know, 1,000 miles an hour, and it was you had to be fanatical in your drive to build it, because I believed in it so much, you know, and it became global. It's there today, but that's what made me do it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. The protest against the soldiers in Luton Town on the homecoming. And that's what I call it. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. And because I didn't ask for it, you know, it was sort of dumped on my lap. So then I had two options: sit back, wipe my lip, wipe my mouth and go home, or do something about it. And I think anybody that feels passionate enough about a subject, which is the beauty of a democracy, you should have the right to protest. You know. But I didn't disagree with them being able to protest, because it's democracy. I would have said to those lads on that day, I would have said, look, you're not happy about the war in Iraq. We're not happy about the war. I didn't support the war. I still don't. I never supported the war. What I supported was my soldiers, my armed servicemen, British armed forces going there to do a professional job. Who I didn't support was politicians. I think they should have been in the dock, particularly Tony Blair. I can't believe he's not been in the dock. So, although I didn't agree with the war, never have done, it was an illegal war, that's the politician's fault. It's not the soldier's fault. So if you've got a gripe, you don't go to the man on the ground. You go to the man that's ordered it. You go to the man at the top. So that's what they should have done. But I would have said to those lads, look, fair enough, you're going to have a demonstration. The soldiers are coming home there. If you have your demo there, it's going to cause massive unrest. It's going to be violence, blah, 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 it's incredibly insulting. I said, right, you can have your protest. They're coming in this side of the town. You can have your protest around that side of the town. So you get your protest. You know, you get your media coverage, you get your protest. Because it's a democracy. I might not like what you're saying and what you're protesting about, but I'll defend your right to protest about it. Because you can't say, oh, this is a democracy and it only works for us. It doesn't work for you. They still have the right to protest. But you have to use common sense about where it's located. I mean, if you put them so close together, you know, they're going to clash. So, yeah, you can have your protest. You're not happy about the war? You want to protest? Over there. Over here, these people are going to support their troops coming home. You know, they've lost local lads, good lads, human beings, and the vast majority of the public support the armed forces, as I do. I'm very, because of my military family's background, you know, it's an extra little thing for me. So, but that's it. That's a democracy. That's what should have been happening done. But that was the straw that broke the camel's back, like I say.
Where it comes to like being English, it's kind of a hard one to say, really, you know, because in this society that we're from now, we're trying to be accepted, but at the same time, we're not, because we're always looked at as a stereotype. If we're entertainers, singers, or rappers, but there's black men out here that want to be businessmen, intellectuals, and trying for change. It's just like, as you seen in the Oscars the other day, where they're saying, you know, I watched the film with Will Smith, and that was an Oscar-winning performance, but he didn't even get recognised. And it's like, when you have to speak out against certain things like that, it still makes us seem like we're trying to become something when we're already here. And when we're speaking out and trying to talk about knowledge and empowering ourselves, we're looked upon as if we're trying to gain something. We're not trying to gain something, we're just trying to be accepted, just like anyone else in society. That's my view.
There you go.
What do you say to those people who, and it's a common thing, this view that people view, they put the EDL and say the EDL is a far right group. So they put the EDL with their National Front, they put the EDL with the BNP. What do you they put the EDL with Combat 18? What do you think? What do you think?
Well, for starters, Combat 18 was a honey trap by the government, right? That's what people need to understand. Combat 18 were never set up by themselves, right? Combat 18, what the government do, right? They'll set up a website, they'll start an organisation with extreme Aryan lunatics, you know, far right, real Nazis, spewing hate, bile, whatever. And what they'll do is that's their website. And they'll monitor that website, but everybody that logs onto it and starts joining in, what that does for the government, that notifies them who they've got to watch that's got this kind of interest, right? Because anybody that's got that kind of interest, you've got to say is a little bit dangerous. So that's a honey trap. Right? There was a German organisation very similar, and it fell apart because 67% of the people in it were police officers, undercover. That's how bad it got. It was completely saturated with undercover police officers. So in the end, it just dissolved. It fell apart, and that's how they broke it down. So, you know, they're clever like that, the government. They've been doing it a long time. But when people call the English Defence League far right, it does make me chuckle because we're not even classified, we weren't even classified by the Metropolitan Police. The British Police Force classified us as a right-wing group, right? A street protest movement. Not far right, only the media. There's a special unit in the government that classify who you are, whether you're far right, far left, whatever. And we weren't classified far right by the government or by the police force. And they've said that publicly. They've put that out in a statement. It's the media that tagged us far right. Do you know what I mean? So I've never been far right. I'm not interested in far right. You know? So there's nothing far right about what I was standing up for, which was equality, democracy and liberty. You know? I was trying to stand up against homicidal maniacs, terrorists, you know, these jihadists. You've seen it today. I've been screaming about the likes of ISIS now and all their followers and supporters. I've been screaming about that for years, but I was being called a racist for it. And that's the irony of it all, the madness of it all, is that when I was trying to all I was trying to do was expose it to wake the public up. That was our drive, if you like, not to cause civil unrest, not to cause violence, it was never about hate, never ever about hate, because I don't hate anybody. I despise the haters, if you like. But my drive wasn't about hate. My drive was what I was doing was for love. You know, a love of my town, love of my country, love of my armed forces, love of the children's futures, grandchildren, my brothers, your children's futures. Do you know what I mean? Love of my fellow man, my fellow brothers and sisters in Luton Town. You know, whatever race or creed, just human beings. And Nigel will tell you this as well, and God bless Lemos. But I used to say, look, there's only one race that matters to me, and there's only one race that's important above all others, anything else, and that's the human race. That's it. People are just people. Do you know what I mean? Human beings. It's just that we're different. We're from different places. That's all there is to it. But when you've got insane, brainwashed, homicidal lunatics like the ISIS and all those other groups, all these jihadists, they're just Nazis. They're just as bad as the Nazis. They've got to be stopped.
I don't think you have to be white to be British. I think England is like, it's a place of, how can I say, it's like, there's different kind of thought patterns to it. A lot of the people, again, stigmatise themselves in it because a white guy, he's not British in it, he's not English really, he's German, he's from this country, that country, he's a mix of many other nationalities. So when it's like, you're looking at a situation where you're saying, oh, do you think a white person has an upper on a black person? I'd say no, because I think a black person strives just as hard as a white person to become something. I'm not saying that you might not have to work twice as hard, but at the same time, I think England is starting to accept and understand who we are. But again, like I said, it's about a change. It's about taking steps forward for us to integrate higher in society and be able to be black businessmen again, where we're able to own our own properties, own our own shops, think about it, there's a Chinatown and there's so many different places. But black society, all we have is the ghettos. We should have something for us. We should have something more, somewhere where the kids can go and learn about African heritage, Jamaican heritage, Britishness heritage, Barbadian heritage, all the Caribbean islands, and learn knowledge. That's one place that we haven't got, and I think if we can, and we can get certain amounts of funding, then we should be able to build our own, our own society, or integrated in the community. That's what I think.
One of the key things that we've found as we've been doing our work is we've looked at the work of British historians, and typically historians who've studied the impact of black, African, Caribbean and Asian communities in Britain. And this is it creates more complexities around the ideas of what Britishness is, because if we look at it, essentially we would think, and the common idea is that until 1945, with the Windrush generations, that they were the first black communities or non-white communities to come to Britain. That is the communities that came, the Windrush generation from Jamaica, and then you had the Indian immigrants and Pakistani immigrants coming at a later time. So we have that period of immigration. So we know that, yes, there was the Windrush generation, then Indian immigrants, Pakistani immigrants coming into the country at a later time, and then, more recently, migrants coming from West Africa and Eastern Europe. But when we've looked at the work of historians, there have been black communities in Britain going back thousands of years. In each era, in the Tudor, during the Tudor, for example, during the Tudor era, you had black communities, people, African traders in Britain. During the Tudor era,
you had the African Romans, right? Roman legions. At the time, you know, thousands of years ago, guarding Hadrian's Wall, Septimius Severus, the African who was responsible for Britain, you know, the Roman emperor at that time, an African. You have Africans, you know, you have testimonies, historical documents talking about Africans involved in daily British life, normal, hundreds of years ago, in every era. Africans present, Indian gypsies present in Britain, mentioned, documented people here. So this idea that Britain has been, you know, literally white since its history, and it's only in the last 100 years that, you know, these people of black origin have come, is actually false. There's been black people in this country going back through each era, going back thousands of years, and Chinese people, and people of Indian origin, because there's documentation to talk about these people. There's coins, there's, you know, you can visit cemeteries, there's so much evidence to show. It's not a secret. You know, if you do enough digging, you'll find that there's been communities here from ancient times. Then you can go a little bit deeper, and then you look at, well, the people who are of white British origin, how British are they really? The Angles, we use that term Anglo-Saxon, but the Angles are a Germanic tribe. The Saxons are a Germanic tribe. The Vikings are a Scandinavian tribe. The Normans, so we talk about William the Conqueror, you know, and we talk about the Normans who came and were very involved, much involved in the development in some of the more sort of like the actual political systems that Britain uses now, you know, the recording of births and death and all these systems that we used to as part of, but they are of French origin. So who's actually British in terms of really, you're talking about migrants or the descendants of migrants from ancient or recent times, but essentially everybody's a migrant. You know, if your ancestor 200 years ago was Norman or of French origin, or 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, the reality of it is people came from different parts of the world, different parts of Europe, and settled here and lived here. Now, you're you know, if you're white British, there's a 99% chance you're the descendant of one of these groups who are coming to Britain at some point. But at what point do people actually become British? You know, because it's difficult for somebody who's a descendant of a Saxon or the descendant of a Norman to then look and say, well, look at these immigrants from here, you're a foreigner, when at some point you yourself or your heritage comes from foreigners or so-called foreigners. And then there's another deeper level, and that deeper level is how essentially, you know, every European is a descendant of an African in terms of humanity, left Africa, the first human beings, early human beings left Africa and went around the world. In terms of the Cro-Magnon man, you know, we're talking tens of thousands of years. These early Europeans were Africans who settled in Europe and actually underwent genetic change due to the environmental conditions at the time. The fact that we did have ice ages and environmental conditions, which meant genetic selection in terms of, how straight hair, lighter skin was favourable in those conditions. So every European essentially is a descendant of an African, So, you could, you've got people of African heritage who were like, well, where's my place in this? Where's my place in this Britishness? So I think the whole concept of Britishness and who's a migrant and who's an immigrant and who really has a right to be here and who has not got the right to be here becomes a lot more complicated when you start looking at history.
Well, if you look around, most of the corner shops are owned by Polish people or Asian people, and most companies, big companies in Britain and in other countries like America, they're usually owned by Asian people or people that are from China or Africa or the Caribbean. And I think that people coming here have really made Britain more varied. And so you see Asian people or you see a Chinese person most places where you go, and it's just made it really varied of the different cultures in the British society.
Everybody in Britain is the descendant of a migrant, or it's all about how far back we're going to go in history to see when your ancestors arrived in Britain, because the Celts, the Normans, the Saxons, the Vikings, the Angles, all of these people came from somewhere else. You got people who are descendants of the Romans, came from somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? So I feel that it's a deeper thing than what you would see in the mass media in terms of these people are British and these people aren't. Do you know what I mean? Because yeah, you say you're British, but if I do a genetic test on you, how British are you going to be actually? Where's your genetic strain comes from? If your genetic strain comes from Germany and you've only been here 150 years, you don't really have the right to be jumping up and down and accusing other people of being an immigrant that's causing problems.
Okay, now when I was growing up, we were told that Black Britain began right here. 1948, the Empire SS Windrush arrived and they landed in Tilbury Docks. Now, while that's true, that raises a question. Is this the whole truth or is there more to it? I think those are interesting questions. Is it true that Black Britain began in 1948? Now, when our ancestors arrived in 1948, they landed in a country with a long and proud history. But what are the details? What I'm going to do is play you a timeline, and that timeline is going to trace about 6,000 years of British history. Now, while you're watching the timeline, you need to take notice of two questions. What date did the Romans arrive here? And the second question is, what date did the Anglo-Saxons arrive here? So are we clear about the two questions? Yes? They're not trick questions. The information's in the timeline. Two questions. You need to know this because the details matter. Check this out. Okay, what answers did people have? What date did the Romans arrive here? 43 what? Right, is everyone agreed on that? Okay, what date did the Anglo-Saxons arrive here? What date? 410 what? Okay, so who was here first, Romans or Anglo-Saxons? Why are people blank? If everyone says 43 AD and then 410, simple question. Who was here first, Romans or Anglo-Saxons? Can't hear nobody? So everyone's agreed the Romans were living in Britain before the Anglo-Saxons came here. Yes? Everyone's agreed on that. All right, let's get on with the presentation. So that raises the question then, who are the English? Think that's a good question? Because if we can identify who the English are, then that way, anything that's Roman is before the English, isn't it? Does that make sense? All right, so who are the English?
The next person I'm going to meet threatened to sue if this programme discriminated against the English. Jane Phillips believes that to be English, you must be descended from the Anglo-Saxons.
Hi. Hello.
You.
Now, if Jane Phillips is correct, that to be English, you must be an Anglo-Saxon. Is that what she just said?
Yeah.
Therefore, if the Anglo-Saxons got here in 410 AD, therefore the English got here in 410 AD. Not true. Yes? Is everyone's agreed? Now, when the Romans were here, there cannot have been any English people living here because the English people were Anglo-Saxons in a different country. They were in Germany and Denmark. Yes? Are we agreed?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
E Youth Academy travelled to Germany to discover how the immigration issues is affecting Germans. Germany has 4.5 million Muslims, and it has been the favoured destination by migrants because of its economy and attitude towards migrants. We wanted to talk to youth workers in the city of Berlin to tell them about our work, to find out how these issues are affecting them.
What I'm a bit surprised of is, you know, we have Europe now for 20 years, more than 20 years. It's a European process. You know, Germany is united 25 years now, and everybody's talking Europe, Europe, Europe. You know, people can travel around, can see Europe, can learn Europe, can, you know, people are connected via internet, and you know, the world, and everybody's saying the world becomes smaller and smaller and more together, and the global village and all that stuff, you know. And if there comes a crisis, you see how fast people come back to their roots. You know, my village, my town, my country, borders, you know, yeah, it's good, yeah, put on fences, you know, the same people who applauded Hungary 25 years ago for cutting the fence between East and West, for tearing down the wall, you know. The same people applaud now Hungary for building up a fence. It's the same people. And it's very, very strange, you know. And this is what surprises me, how many people are affected by that, how deep is their, you know, their fear. And this is, it's strange, and it shows me that we, let's say we on the other side, we who should work or who should have known how little our thoughts were. And it brings me to think, did we do everything right? Or which mistakes did we do? Or is it, you know, about that the problem is too big just for us to cope? Or did we do the wrong things, simply? Yeah. This is what I feel it's about, and yeah, and I could imagine that, you know, people in the UK, for example, suddenly reinvent the idea of being an island, because it works, or it worked, and still it works, you know? It's not that easy to come to the UK, it's very primitive. For refugees, it's not that easy to come to the UK because there's, you know, still water around it, you know? Just, you know, to Germany, people could walk, and they did walk. Just walk in, and nobody could stop them. Just because, you know, they did it, and it's masses of people. You know, like, you know, the Berlin Wall wasn't called, you know, a wall. It was called an anti-fascist building it was anti-fascistisches Bollwerk. It's I don't know it in English, but it's, you know, it was called somehow different. And so I think they will not call it a fence or a wall or something like that. Well, what they say is we try to fight the reasons for refugees to come. We encourage the people to stay in their countries and stuff like that, you know, which does, in fact, is nothing more than being neo-colonial policies just to keep people where they are. So, and creating a kind of backyard, you know, European backyard. You have Europe guarded and fenced, and then you have helping, let's call it helping programs, stuff like that. You know, what they call it now is, you know, building up big camps for people in Turkey and Italy and wherever people come, and call them hotspots for registration, you know. It's in fact, it's nothing more than a camp to concentrate people. Ha ha ha. But you cannot call that in Germany, you know, because Germany, and then you say we need concentration camps for people, you know. That's not that political correct, but in fact it's the same thing. Keeping people together, and this is it. That being, you know, Germans being some kind of master race, being some kind of better people than black ones or Asians or whatever. It's still there and has never been away. Never. Just, you know, well, if you ask people, well, like you know, what's that called? You know that word race shame, you know that? Well, I don't know the exact English word, Rassenschande, you know? Nobody's talking officially about that. Nobody. It's a word never used in official language, never. But if you see a black man with a white woman on in any place in Germany where there's a celebration or party or what, some drunken people will come and say that word. And you ask why? Just ask yourself why. Why is it away? Or isn't it away? You know, nobody's asking about it. It led Germany to a very, very bad time, that kind of ideology. But it's still there. And it's still there because, you know, in my opinion, it's still there because, you know, there's a kind of culture in Germany that says what you say in the family is divided or others than what you say in public. Or official policy is official policy, but in my private life I try to find a niche where I can talk my language, where I can live my issues of life, where I can talk whatever I want. And you know, I come from the East, I know that very good, to say that people in family on the breakfast table, you know, said all that shit about the government and the state is ugly and we have to flee and the West is much better than that and communists are bad and stuff like that. And then the kids go to school and say socialism is a good thing, our government is the greatest in the world. And so because the parents said what we say here, you won't say in school. So, and this is, you know, a culture in Germany, I think, since, well, the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648.
Really?
And so it's very, very deep in the private life of people. It's not, you know, it's not a pluralism, a live-in pluralism. It's not a live-in democracy in their minds of many, many people. There are, of course, many, many people who learned from history, of course, in Germany, and I always have the hope that this is still the majority. But what I see is the lower the culture is, the lower the knowledge is of people, the bigger become those primitive, you know, sayings, those primitive language.
And if there's anything you could improve about the world, what would it be?
For it, like I said, be less judgmental, to get more doors open for cultured people, and I think it should be improved that it shouldn't be what you look like that changes how you are treated in certain areas and certain situations.
What have we discovered doing this work? This project has been massive. We started off with a simple question: how has migration affected British society? But that question led to so many others. How long have migrants been here? What does British mean? Who is actually British? We believe that what we have achieved is to start a discussion that needs to be taken further. What we do know is that us and all the young people who have been involved in this project, our view of the world has been forever changed. We must go beneath the surface and dig deeper. As they say, know the ledge and don't fall off the edge.